Hello everybody. How's everyone doing today?
Great.
Everyone's good? Okay, please don't be shy if you can't hear what we're saying. We're saying it to you and for you, so if you're not hearing us, let us know, please, okay? So my name is Caitlin Steinke, and I am an asylum attorney who volunteers with RIF. And today what you're going to be seeing is something that I've been working on for a while, and I'm very, very grateful to RIF and to Martin for helping us make it a reality today. What you're going to be seeing right here is sort of a demonstration of what an asylum interview looks like, okay? I'm going to be here the whole time, and I'm going to be pausing the interview at various moments when I want to point out things to you and discuss them with you, okay? Sorry, I'm sort of ignoring my script completely. The purpose of this performance is to give you a better sense of what your asylum interview will be like and to provide you with some helpful strategies for the interview. So the purpose of what they're going to be saying to one another is it's not to show you the correct answer to anything or the right type of case that you could have for asylum. The correct answer is going to depend on the individual asylum case. So the purpose is to help you understand the various ways that the asylum officer will ask a question, the kinds of information the asylum officer is looking for in your answer to the question, and most importantly, some ways that you can start thinking about how you can answer certain questions. And the goal here is to make you feel more confident going into your interview, to have you feel like you understand what's about to happen better, and that you feel more prepared for the interview. So it's very important that you remember every single person's asylum case is going to be different. And the case today, it does involve a situation involving police abuse of the asylum seeker. Not everyone's case will involve harm by the police. And you can still be eligible for asylum even if you were never harmed by the police. So just remember that this is not a presentation on what kinds of cases make you eligible for asylum, what kind of cases are strong asylum cases. I don't even really want you to be paying too much attention to the story that's being told. I want you to instead be really focusing on what is the question the asylum officer is asking and thinking about what's a good response to that question. How can I respond to that question in a way that's actually answering that question and not sort of floating to the side of the question, okay? And of course I have to say this, please remember that none of what I'm saying today is a substitute for legal advice. It's not legal advice to anyone in here. These are strategies that can help you be more prepared for your asylum interview. To the extent that you can, it's always best to consult with an asylum attorney about your individual case and your personal circumstances and the specific facts of your case. A full asylum interview can last between an hour and a half to 3, even 4 hours. We're not going to keep you here that long today. This is going to be a very condensed, shortened version of that. So there will be a lot of parts of the asylum interview that I'm going to sort of cut out from the performance today, okay? So just keep in mind this is not going to be completely comprehensive. It's not going to cover every moment of an interview. I also want everyone to please be aware that there will be portions of the demonstration today where the asylum seeker is going to discuss police harming him. There will be stories about a police interrogation and torture and abuse by the police. Everyone is here voluntarily, and we have not locked the doors. If anyone wants to leave for any reason at any time during the interview, please do that. I want you all to feel safe and comfortable with this experience, and if it is becoming uncomfortable for anybody, you are welcome to leave, and you can always watch it later online. Also, during the portions of the performance where I'm having conversations with you, I want them to be as interactive as possible, and I want them to actually be conversations. I'm going to be pointing out things and asking you for suggestions on how the asylum seeker could have perhaps answered a question better. Please go ahead and yell out answers, okay? I want you to be really thinking about this. I want you to be paying attention to what's being said and thinking about how the answer could have been stronger. So I will be asking for your participation. I won't call on anybody. I hate that more than anything in the world. But if you do have something to contribute, by all means do. There's no wrong answers here, okay? You will see that the asylum seeker does have paper on the table. That is his script for this performance only. Please remember that at your asylum interview, you are not allowed to bring in any papers that you can read off of, okay? That's just for purposes of this performance. Also, at a real asylum interview, you will be sitting across from the asylum officer at a table. Yeah, they're faced a little towards you so that you can hear them and see them. So just remember that this is, you know, we've changed a few of the details here just to make it more accessible for everybody watching. All right, and at the end of the presentation, I will give people an opportunity for questions once we've completed the demonstration. Okay, all right, so we are going to get started, and just as a reminder, the asylum officer is the person sitting next to the computer. The asylum seeker is the person who applied for asylum and is now having their interview.
Good afternoon. I am the asylum officer who will be interviewing you today. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, great. I believe you're doing this interview today in English, right?
Yes, in English.
Just so that you are aware, you have the right to have your interview today in any language that you want, as long as you bring a competent interpreter. Do you still wish to waive your right to an interpreter and proceed in English?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know why you're here today?
I am applying for asylum.
Great. The purpose of this interview today is to provide you with the opportunity to tell why you have applied for asylum. I'm going to ask you a lot more questions during this interview. During the interview, I will be taking notes on my computer. I may not always be looking at you, but that does not mean that I'm not listening to everything that you are saying. This interview is not being recorded, which is why it is very important that you speak very slowly and in short sentences so that I can type everything that you're saying.
Okay.
Everything in your asylum application, personal statement, and supporting documents is confidential. And everything you tell me today during this interview is also confidential. This means that none of the information or documents you provide as part of your asylum case will be shared outside the U.S. government. We will not tell your home government that you have applied for asylum. And we will not contact your home government to try and verify certain information about your case. So please, I know it can be difficult, but it is very important that you tell me as many details as possible about your case. And remember that it will not get back to your home government.
I understand.
If you don't understand a question that I ask, please tell me so that I can ask it in a different way. And if you don't know the answer to my question, please just say that you don't know.
Okay.
Okay. The interview today will be in 3 parts. The first part is a review of your asylum application. I just want to go through it with you to see if you need to make any corrections to any of the information or to add new information. The second part of the interview is when I will ask you about why you are applying for asylum. And the third part of the interview is when I will discuss with you how you will receive your decision.
Okay.
All right. Now, before we begin, I need to place you under oath. First, please sign this oath form. Now, this says 2 main things. The first is that you wish to proceed in English today. The second is that you make a legal promise to tell the truth, and that you understand that there can be consequences for you if you intentionally lie in order to try to get asylum. Do you understand this form?
Yes.
Okay, please sign here. And now I'm going to place you under oath. Please stand and raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. Did anyone help you prepare your asylum application?
No, I did it by myself.
Is everything in your asylum application true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Do you have any changes to make to your asylum application?
No.
Did anyone help you prepare your personal statement or your supporting documents?
No, I did that by myself too.
Is everything in your personal statement true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
I see that you have submitted some letters from people in your home country. How'd you obtain those letters?
I emailed them and asked if they would write the letters for me. They did, and 2 of them mailed the letters to me. The other person was too scared to mail the letter, so she just emailed it to me.
Is everything in all of your supporting documents true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Do you have any medical conditions that are preventing you from remembering today?
From remembering today?
Let me rephrase the question. Do you currently have any medical conditions that make it difficult for you to remember things?
Oh, no.
Are you currently taking any medications that prevent you from remembering things?
No.
Have you presented any fraudulent documents to the U.S. government or a U.S. government official?
No.
Have you ever lied to the U.S. government or a U.S. government official?
Yes, I have.
Can you tell me about that?
When I filled out my application for a U.S. visa, there was a question on the application asking if I had ever been arrested or detained. I lied and said no.
Why did you lie on that question?
I had been arrested and detained by the authorities, and they had threatened to do it again. I was trying to escape. I needed to flee my country. I was afraid that if I put on my visa application that I had been arrested, I would not get a visa, and I would be stuck in my country, and they would keep hurting me and maybe even kill me.
Okay, thank you for being honest about that. Did you lie about anything else on your visa application?
No, everything else was true.
Did you go to a visa interview at the U.S. Embassy?
Yes.
Was everything you told the official during your visa interview true and correct?
Yes, it was.
Okay, it is important to remember that the asylum officer will have access to more than just your asylum application. So if you ever applied for a U.S. visa, they will have a copy of that visa application. And if you previously submitted any immigration paperwork to the U.S. government, they'll have copies of that too. So if you've had encounters with U.S. government officials at the border, for example, the asylum officer will also have access to those records. Okay, and I say this to remind everybody that, remember how he took the oath in the beginning, where he promised to tell the truth? So everything you say during your asylum interview, you said that you were going to tell the truth. And intentionally, which just means purposefully, providing false information, purposefully lying to the asylum officer to try and get asylum, not only will the U.S. government deny your asylum case, but they will say, you know what, we're not going to give you any immigration benefits in the future because you lied on your asylum case. So it's just very important to remember that, okay? All right, let's continue.
Okay, now we are going to review your asylum application and make any necessary changes.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to skip this part because this can take some time. So the first part of the interview is where the asylum officer will review your asylum application with you. It's like the first half of your asylum application. I don't know if any of you have taken a look at that application. It's the pages that ask, what is your name? Where were you born? What is your address? List all your family members. All of these questions, all the places you've worked in the past 5 years, the schools you've attended over your life. The asylum officer is just reviewing those with you to make sure that the information in your application is correct, that if any changes need to be made, they can make those changes at the interview. It's not a big deal if you need to make changes, right? They happen all the time. Sometimes people have a baby before their asylum interview. Now they need to add the information about their child. Sometimes they have moved and now you need to put your new address. Sometimes you realize, oh, I spelled my mom's name wrong, right? It's fine. Okay, you just tell the officer what the change is and the officer will make that change to your application. So what we're going to do with the demonstration is we're going to sort of pretend like we've reviewed the application, and we're going to move to part 2 of the interview, which is where the asylum officer will begin asking you, why are you applying for asylum? Okay, go ahead.
Great. We have now reviewed your asylum application, and we made a couple of changes. We added your new telephone number and corrected the dates you attended university. Are there any other corrections we need to make?
No, that is all.
Okay, great. Please sign here to indicate these changes. Everything in your application is now true. All right, thank you. So please tell me why you are applying for asylum.
I'm afraid to return to my country.
Why are you afraid to return?
I will not be safe there.
Why will you not be safe there?
It is too dangerous for me to be there.
Okay, let's pause. The asylum officer is asking the asylum seeker, why are you applying for asylum? Has the asylum seeker given any details? No, right? We have no idea. So remember, the first part of the application, or excuse me, the first part of the interview process is reviewing the application. But the second part, this is what matters, okay? This is the asylum officer asking you for your story, asking you what happened to you in your home country that made you have to leave, and why you're afraid to go back. So usually the way that this second part of the interview begins is with the asylum officer asking you this big question, tell me why you're applying for asylum. They may ask it a different way, which is, tell me why you had to leave your home country. Or they may ask it, tell me why you're afraid to return to your home country. Obviously, these are huge questions, right? They're asking you about a big, important, significant portion of your life. The instinct that we have as people when we are asked a big question is we want to start at the beginning and tell the person everything, okay? I want you to resist the temptation to do that. What's very helpful is if you have an answer prepared to this question. You will be asked this big question. And instead of starting with the beginning of your life and wanting the asylum officer to listen to the story of who you were as a child and every moment of your life, I want you to think about being prepared with a summary that's 1 or 2 sentences that answers this question in a very focused way that will help you stay focused on the important details of your asylum case and will help the asylum officer also stay focused on what really matters, because we don't want either of you being distracted by other things that you might be thinking about. So when you're providing that summary of your case, that overview, it should include 3 things, okay? And I see a lot of you are taking notes, wonderful. So the first thing it should include is what happened to you or what you are afraid will happen to you, okay? And again, the what is not a 10-minute description of what, it's simple words: arrested, detained, attacked, threatened, okay? The second thing is who. Who did those things to you? Or who are you afraid would do those things to you if you had to go back to your home country? All right? The third part, why. Why did these people do these things to you? Or why would they do those things to you if you went back now? Okay? So if you can practice responding to those big questions, why are you applying for asylum, with a prepared 1 or 2 sentence summary of your case that focuses on what, who, and why, that will help keep you focused during your interview on those details of your case, and it will help the officer also stay focused. And the officer will keep to what is important in your case, and you will keep to what is important to your case. Does that make sense to everybody? The what, who, and why? All right, wonderful. All right, we're gonna try answering this question again with that in mind.
Please tell me why you're applying for asylum.
I'm afraid to return to my country because I fear being arrested, detained, tortured, and even killed by the authorities.
So that was better, right? We have a better sense. Okay, so we got the what. We said arrested, detained, tortured, even killed. We have the who. the authorities, right? The government officials. But we're missing something. We're missing the why, right? We don't know why he fears those things. So let's try this one more time, and we're going to try and get all three of those into the answer. All right.
Please tell me why you're applying for asylum.
I'm afraid to return to my country because I fear being arrested, detained, tortured, and even killed by the authorities because of my political activities against the ruling party.
Bravo, right? Does everyone see how that summary, we have a clear picture now of what this case is about? The asylum officer, importantly, has a clear picture of what the case is about, and you're both going to stay much more focused during the interview if you start the interview with this nice, clear overview. All right? So let's keep going.
Were you ever physically harmed or threatened in your country?
Yes.
How many times were you physically harmed?
I was physically harmed 5 times.
How many times were you threatened?
I don't know exactly.
Can you provide an estimate?
I think probably at least 10 times.
So sometimes the asylum officer will ask you a question that you don't know the exact answer to, and that is okay, right? So what's important is to be honest with the officer. If you don't know the answer to a question, tell the officer you don't know. And if it's a question like this where you can approximate or provide an estimate, you can work with the officer to do that. So that was a perfect example of the asylum seeker saying, I don't know exactly. And the officer asks, well, why don't you give me a guess? What's an estimate? And then the asylum seeker provided an estimate, okay? So don't be worried if there's a situation where you don't know exactly what time of day something happened or exactly how many people are in this room. We can all guess, right? Okay, great. Carry on.
You said you were physically harmed 5 times. When did these 5 incidents occur?
I was at a small meeting organized by the opposition party, and we were planning our next big protest. I was in charge of creating pamphlets that listed all the terrible human rights violations that the ruling party was doing, and also explaining how our opposition party would put an end to these abuses and hold the government officials accountable. We wanted the people to join us in standing up to the cruelty of the ruling party. The authorities showed up and beat us, then arrested us and brought us to jail.
Have we heard when?
No.
No. The asylum seeker, this is something that we commonly do when we're asked about something is we think, oh, the event. Oh, you want to know about the event. And we just start telling the story. It's very important that we listen to the question that the officer is asking and that is the question that we're answering and that we're not providing all this other stuff on the side, okay? So there are generally 3 types of questions the asylum officer will ask. Type 1, yes or no questions, okay? So just answer yes or no if it's a yes or no question, and if they want more information, they will let you know. But, you know, if they say, did you or did you not, just say yes or no, okay? And then you can provide more details when they ask. Second are questions like this, where they're asking for specific information. When did this happen? How many people were there? How often did you attend these meetings, right? These are asking for dates, numbers, frequency, right? Not asking for the details, just the specific information. The third type of question the asylum officer may ask are the ones for descriptions, right? And this is the time when you're prepared with all of those details. So for example, if the officer asks, what happened on that day? Or please tell me in detail about the 3rd time that you were attacked. Or please describe the jail cell that you were held in. This is your opportunity to paint that picture for the officer, to really describe with lots and lots of details in response to their question. So remember to listen to the question, and answer that question directly. All right, let's try this again.
You said that you were physically harmed 5 times. When did these 5 incidences occur?
The first time was on February 3rd. Then I was in detention for 8 days. And I was beaten on February 4th, February 5th, and February 9th.
What year?
The last time was on March 15th.
What year did all of these incidents take place?
They all happened last year.
Were you ever physically harmed after March 15th?
No.
Okay, let's start with the first time that you were physically harmed. Please describe in detail what happened.
I was attending a meeting organized by United for Justice, the main opposition party in my country. I was held in the early evening of February 3rd last year at about 6:30 p.m. There were 4 of us there, and it took place in the home of one of our members in charge of organizing events. We were planning for the next big protest, which would happen on March 15th. The meeting had just started. There was only maybe 10 or 15 minutes of formal discussion when there was suddenly a loud banging on the front door. We heard loud voices yelling to open the door and that they would break it down if we didn't let them in. We had closed the curtains before the meeting as a precaution, so I couldn't see outside the house. I didn't know how many people were outside. The event organizer got up and unlocked the door, and then 5 police officers burst inside. They were holding big guns and looked very angry. They were shouting at us. I was immediately afraid. I didn't know what they would do.
What were these officers shouting?
They were all yelling at the same time, and I couldn't really make out what they were saying. It sounded like, "Stay still, don't move." We all put our hands up because we did not want them to shoot us. There was one officer, I think he was the leader of the group because he spoke first. He said that we were engaging in activities against the government and that we had to go with them. The officers then handcuffed us one by one and led us toward a large police van. There were only about, 4 or 5 of us, 4 of us and 5 of them. So each of us was being led by an officer. They were very rough with all of us. I saw to my right that the officer leading one of my fellow party members was touching her aggressively on her body, and I instinctively yelled, "Hey, stop!" That is when that officer and the one who was leading me began to beat me for speaking out. The officer who was leading me hit me several times on the side of my head with his fist, maybe 3 times. The other officer ran at me and kicked the side of my leg, and I fell down. They decided that I would be separated from the other party members. They told me they would teach me a lesson. They put the other 3 party members in the police van, and the officer who had been leading me put me into a smaller police car with the officer I thought was the leader of the group. Then they took me to the police station.
Can you tell me about the ride from your friend's house to the police station?
Not much happened.
Can you please explain in detail about the ride from your friend's house to the police station?
Well, nothing really happened then.
All right, let's pause there. So the asylum seeker was very detailed when describing the police entering the home, right? And suddenly, the asylum officer is asking for details about the ride, and nothing much happened. So what are some details that we would be expecting the asylum officer to include in the answer to this question? What are some things that could help tell the story of a ride in a car from one location to another? Spout out some ideas.
Did they have you constrained?
Great, yeah, whether you're restrained in the car,
Or did they hit you or something?
right? If you were hit again in the car, how long the drive took, right? If you could see where you were going.
Yeah, if it was dark or...
Yeah.
Recognize the car or not?
Right, if you recognized it. Yeah. right? So these details will help answer the officer's question about, tell me about the ride. Because obviously stuff was happening, right? The answer of nothing really happened is not accurate, and it's not helpful. Because every time that there's an answer that's sort of, nothing really, that makes the officer wonder if it's a true story, right? If we can't give details about events when we're asked questions about them, it makes the officer wonder if we're telling the truth. Mm-hmm. So the details are very, very important for you to be trusted by the officer, for your story to come alive. And we need the officer to feel like they're experiencing this story with you as you tell it, okay? So let's try answering this question again with those details that everyone pointed out.
Can you tell me about the ride from your friend's house to the police station?
My head really hurt from the beating. It was throbbing. I was afraid I had a concussion, and I didn't know what was going to happen. I was sitting in the back seat, and the two officers were in the front. I was still handcuffed and with my hands behind me, so it was very uncomfortable. It was a really bumpy ride, and I didn't know where they were taking me. I didn't know if they were taking me to the same police station as the others, a different police station, or some other place. I tried asking where they were taking me, and the officer in the front passenger seat yelled at me to keep quiet, or else I would regret it. I didn't say anything else. The drive seemed very long, over an hour, maybe 2 hours. Then we stopped at a police station. The same officer turned around and told me, "Welcome to your new home."
Okay, so none of us were there for this fictional event, but do we feel like we were kind of in the car with the asylum seeker, the way that they're describing it, right? Those details make the story come alive. It makes the story real and believable. And it's going to have an impression on the asylum officer when you're able to include those details when you're telling these stories. It's very, very important. Okay, let's keep going.
Did you recognize the place they brought you to?
No, it was not the police station in my neighborhood. I had never seen it before.
You indicated earlier that you were detained for 6 days?
No, I said 8 days.
Oh, that's right. I apologize. 8 days. And where were you detained during that time?
In a jail cell.
Where was this cell?
The police station had 2 floors. On the ground floor in the back were the jail cells. That's where I was.
Did you ever, let me rephrase. Were you ever in the same cell? Were you in the same cell all 8 days of detention?
Yes.
Did you ever leave the cell?
Yes, when they took me to be interrogated.
Okay. Please describe in detail the jail cell where you were detained for 8 days.
Well, it was small and not very nice.
Can you provide any other details about the room?
All right, we're having the same problem, right? Mm-hmm. The lack of details, it makes the story sound strange and makes the asylum officer start to wonder if this really happened to this person. The asylum officer should be able to picture what happened to you clearly based on your description of the event. And based on, small and not very nice, are we able to really picture this jail cell where he was held for 8 days? No, right? So what are some details that the asylum seeker could include in the answer that would help us picture the jail cell that he was in for 8 days?
Was he alone or not?
Great, yeah. Were there other people in the room? Was he by himself?
Window.
Right, were there windows? Excellent. And what comes with windows? Light, right? Was it a dark room with a light?
Bathroom.
Right, excellent. The asylum officers always ask about toilets when you're talking about detention, okay? What about some other things?
You could see outside.
Sorry, could you see outside? Did you eat anything? Great, right? Food and water. The temperature in the room, was it hot? Was it cold? Right, was it smelly? Yeah? These are great details. Great, great, great details. Let's try this again.
Please describe in detail the jail cell where you were detained for 8 days.
I was in a cell all by myself. It was so small, maybe, well, less than half the size of this small office. The floor was hard concrete, and I had to sleep directly on the floor without any blankets or a mattress. When I tried to sleep, I took off my shirt and rolled it under my head like a pillow. It was so hot in there, and there were no windows. There was one small light hanging from the ceiling, but it was always flickering, which gave me a headache. There was no toilet, just a bucket in the corner. I had to use that bucket the whole time I was there, and it was never emptied. There were so many flies, and it smelled so dirty. The walls were also concrete, except one wall was metal bars where the door was. I tried to see through the bars, but I couldn't see anything except the wall of the hall.
Right. Can everyone picture this room a lot better now? Right? And I'm really impressed the details that everybody threw out. They were all in here. So really great job thinking about how to describe a space that not the other person has experienced with you. And again, I just want to emphasize once again, I know that we're talking about a jail cell and detention in a police office. Again, asylum doesn't have to be related to those things. These examples of how to use details to describe places and events, they go to every type of case. So any type of place that you're describing, if it's a public square, if it's a park, if it's your own home, if it's your neighborhood, right? All the same strategies apply, okay? It doesn't have to be a jail cell that gets this level of description and detail. It's going to be any place where anything happened to you that's an important part of your story. You should think about these really small, important details that will help the officer feel like they're seeing it in a movie, okay? All right, let's keep going.
You said earlier that you were taken out of your cell to be interrogated. Where did they take you to be interrogated?
A room upstairs on the second floor.
How many times did they take you to be interrogated there?
3 times.
On which days were you interrogated during your detention?
Well, I was put in the cell the evening of February 3rd. The first interrogation was the next day, February 4th. I was interrogated again the day after that, February 5th. Then they just left me in the cell all by myself for a few days. The last interrogation was on February 9th.
Were you always interrogated in the same room?
Yes.
Please describe the room where you were interrogated.
It was bigger than the cell. There was a police officer sitting at a metal desk, and there was a folder with papers in it on the desk. There was a metal chair in the room. They told me to sit there. 2 other police officers were standing in the back corner when I was brought in. There were no windows, but the lights were very bright.
And what happened during the first interrogation?
They made me sit on the chair, and then the officer sitting at the desk said he knew everything about me and what my friends and I were trying to do. He said, if you give me what I want, I can make sure your punishment is less.
What did he want?
He wanted me to give information about the other party members, organizers, and supporters. He asked for all their names. He wanted to know how we got our funding, if we worked with foreign governments. How did we share information about our protests? Who printed the pamphlets? Who wrote them? These kinds of questions.
Did he ask you anything else?
He wanted me to tell him everything. He wanted to know how our opposition party operated, how we organized, how we spread information, how we got our funding.
Anything else?
No.
How did you answer these questions?
I told him I didn't know anything. I said it was my first meeting and the other people didn't tell me anything before the police came and arrested us. He said I was lying, and that's when the beatings began.
How were you beaten? It's okay. Take your time. You can continue when you're ready.
All right, let's pause with the asylum seeker in this moment. There will probably be moments during your interview when you feel overwhelmed emotionally, having to talk about these moments that we don't like to think about because they're scary, they're painful. They were some of the worst moments of our lives, and now we're being asked to tell that story to someone we just met. It's not easy, but it's okay to feel nervous about it, and it's okay to be uncomfortable with doing that. Remember that the asylum office is not a place of detention. The asylum interview is not an interrogation, okay? The asylum officer cannot keep you there. They cannot make you answer questions. They can't force you to stay in that room. You have the power to leave if you want to, okay? So even if you're feeling overwhelmed, remind yourself that you're in charge in the room, right? You chose to be there and you can choose to leave. And sometimes just remembering that allows us to feel like, I can do this, right? Just giving that moment to remind yourself that this person doesn't have the power to keep you here. That can be very, very helpful. Sometimes just pausing, taking some deep breaths. That can get you refocused and recentered and ready to start talking about these things. The asylum office is a safe place to tell your story. In the beginning of the interview, you'll remember the asylum officer was telling the asylum seeker that nothing that you tell me today will be shared with your government. It's very important to remember and to believe that that is true. The US government will not start contacting your government to verify anything that you've told us. They won't start contacting your family members to verify anything. Only the people that send letters or testimony as part of your case are going to be involved, nobody else. So you need to trust that. And I know it's very, very hard to trust any government. It's hard to trust the US government, I understand. But in order for this process to work for you, you do need to believe that what you say will stay with the US government. Because if you start being concerned that sharing information and sharing details and answering questions could potentially put people that you love back home in danger, now you're at risk of the asylum officer not believing your case, not feeling comfortable granting your case if you're not answering questions, okay? And if you have those concerns, feel free to share them with the officer. And you can tell the officer why you're nervous about answering a certain question. They are trained to be able to discuss this with you and to reassure you. All right, does this make sense to everybody? Okay, great. All right, let's continue, please.
Okay. I'm ready.
Okay. Please tell me how you were beaten.
The main officer gave some kind of signal with his hand, and the two guys to the two guys in the corner, they came towards me. One guy grabbed my hair and pulled my head back, and the other guy slapped me across the face. At this time, I was not in handcuffs. Those two officers then tied my arms down against my sides of the sides of the chair, and then they pulled hard rubber batons out and their belts and began beating me all over my body.
Where on your body did they hit you with the batons?
Here and here and also here.
All right, remember the asylum interview is not being recorded with a video camera. It's only going to be the notes that the asylum officer takes on the computer. So if you're reading the notes and they say I was beaten here, 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 do we know what that is in reference to? Do we have any idea? No. You have to say body parts when you point to them. You can't say, it looked like that. Describe what you're saying. Okay, we want it to be something that someone who's not watching is able to understand. Because once the asylum officer is done conducting the interview, what they do is they type up a summary and they share it with their supervisor. And the supervisors, they do look at the summaries. And we want the supervisor to be able to, understand what the asylum seeker was saying during the interview. And if it's here, there, like this, like that, that's going to not be very helpful, right, for the supervisor or for the asylum officer during the interview. All right, so let's try that again, actually labeling the body parts.
Where on your body did they hit you with the batons?
Across both my arms, and both my legs, my stomach, and my sides.
How long did the beating last?
I don't know exactly. Several minutes. It felt like it lasted forever. I was in so much pain. I didn't know when it was going to stop. Each time I cried out in pain, they hit me even harder.
Did they say anything while they were hitting you?
They said I was a traitor, and I was betraying my country and my people. They said they had ways of making me talk, that they would make me tell them what they wanted to know. I just kept saying that I didn't know anything, and they just kept beating me.
And you said earlier that you were brought to this same room to be interrogated on 3 occasions during your detention, correct?
Yes.
Were you beaten on the other 2 occasions? Please answer yes or no.
I'm sorry. Yes.
During the other 2 interrogations, did the officers ask you the same questions, or did they ask you for other information?
The questions were always the same. They just kept asking for information about our opposition party, who were the members and supporters, how we were organized, where we got our funding.
Did you give them the same responses as the first interrogation?
Yes. I kept repeating that I was brand new to the party and I did not know anything.
And the beatings during the second interrogation, were they the same kind of beatings? Did the officers harm you in any different ways?
No, the beatings were pretty much the same as the first time. They hurt a lot more, though, because I was already so sore from the first time, and now they were hitting my bruises. So the pain was more intense. I think they enjoyed that because I saw them smiling at each other when I screamed in pain.
And the third interrogation, that also included a similar beating?
Actually, the third time was a bit different. The officers beat me in the same ways as the first 2 times, but they also poured a bucket of very cold water over my face. One guy held my head back and the other guys poured the water on my face. The water was going all up my nose and into my mouth. I couldn't breathe. It felt like I was drowning. It was the most terrifying part of my experience there.
Do you need a tissue?
Thank you.
When you were not being interrogated and beaten, how did you spend your time during those 8 days in detention?
There wasn't anything to do. I just waited for the next interrogation.
But you were in detention for 8 days. It's quite a long time. Can you provide more details about how you spent the days in there?
There was nothing to do there. I didn't do anything there.
Okay, let's pause. So, of course, the options are limited. 8 days in a small jail cell. But this is still a common question that asylum officers will ask if you spent a period of time in one place, whether it was in detention, or if you were in a safe house, or if you were hiding in your own home. Anything where you spent time that obviously is going to be a lot of time spent doing nothing, you were still doing things, right? Doing nothing, that's not possible for 8 days. So let's think more about what are some things that perhaps we could use to answer this question that are other than just, I didn't do anything. So what sort of things would we expect to be in an answer for how someone spent time for 8 days in a small room?
Suffering after beating.
Okay, yeah, so what your physical pain was like? Thinking. That's a huge one, right? That's a lot of what we do when we're not doing anything physically, is what are we thinking about?
Praying.
Sure, if you were praying, absolutely.
How many times did you eat?
Right. How often were you brought food and water? Okay. Whether you're able to shower, change your clothes, right? Did you interact with other people? Did new people ever enter that room that you were in? Did you see anyone walk by that you got to talk to? What's something that we all do over an 8-day period? When we're not awake, we are exactly sleeping. How can he sleep? Right? How often was he able to sleep? Was he having nightmares? Was he in so much pain from the bruises covering his body that he wasn't even able to fall asleep? Okay? So there are things happening even when you're not doing anything, right? And these are the sorts of details, again, that are going to make your story come alive for the officer to be able to feel like they are sort of reliving this with you in a way that they can understand, because they weren't there. You are the only expert in your story. And I want you all to really feel strong and confident about that. Yes, it can feel lonely to be the only one who's capable of telling your story, but it gives you a power no one else in the world has. Okay? And I want you to feel that that is something that is to your advantage. You are the one that can share these details with someone who wasn't there. You can educate them about what it was like to be in a room for 8 days when they've had no idea. And I'll tell you right now, the asylum officers, they haven't gone through what you went through. Okay? They need you to tell them what it was like, because they haven't experienced that. And all of our experiences are our individual, personal experiences that are our own. And we don't have the same stories, we haven't lived the same lives. But what we are capable of doing is communicating to one another and being able to use details and emotions so that someone else can understand a little bit what that must have been like. And the emotions are so important. And I know we're not focusing on that today in this performance, because that's really not my objective here. But asylum, when it comes down to it, is about fear. And if you are not able to express your fear to the officer, and again, this goes to safety and feeling comfortable in that room, but if you can push yourself to trust that the officer is somebody that can safely and securely accept your fear and not use it to hurt you, that will be the most powerful thing that you do the day of your interview, is to trust that person. And I know for a lot of the people in this room, and most everyone who goes through an asylum interview, trusting other people because of the experiences that led you to apply for asylum is at the bottom of your list of things that you have any interest in doing. But for the asylum interview, you should make it one of your top priorities that day. Be courageous, be confident, and walk out of that room knowing that you pushed yourself to do something that you didn't think you were able to do, but once you do it, you're going to feel lighter, you're going to feel stronger, and you're going to not regret not feeling like you could have done that, okay? One of the ways to practice that is, if you feel safe and comfortable trusting another person to just share your story, telling one other person and knowing that you can tell somebody and it won't break you, it won't destroy you, you are still in charge of your life and that you still have the power to tell your story, that is going to make you so much more confident for the asylum interview. All right.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it all right? So extraordinary what you're saying, I have to say, from every point of view, human point of view, and everything. In light of the question just prior when you were asking about details, I wonder if it's helpful to suggest as a signpost that sometimes it's good just to really think about your senses, what you hear, what you see, what you maybe taste, what you feel, just like as a signpost for details.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes a quick way to like
Absolutely.
check in with your senses.
Absolutely.
For the details, just to suggest.
No, I think that's great. I think that's the details that we were giving they do go down to senses. I think that's a great way to, if you're the type of person who thinks that way, that's very helpful. Yeah. Okay, all right, let's move on.
When you were not being interrogated and beaten, how did you spend your time during those 8 days in detention?
Well, the time seemed to move so slowly in there. I was in pain from the beatings and covered in bruises. My whole body ached the whole time I was in detention. My cell was becoming more filthy every day. Since they never changed out the bucket I used as a toilet. I was never allowed to shower. I wore the same clothes the entire time I was there. The same clothes I had on when they first arrested me. There was no mattress or pillow for me to sleep on, so I rolled up my shirt and I used it as a pillow. Lying on that hard floor made the pain worse. There was nothing I could do for my pain. They did not give me any painkillers or ointments. I just had to wait for everything to heal. They only fed me once a day, and the food was very bad. It was bland and dirty, and I found small bugs in the food a few times. They gave me one small bottle of water every morning, and I had to drink it slowly for it to last the whole day. I spent most of my time just thinking. There was no one for me to talk to, so I was completely alone with my thoughts. I thought about how they had tortured me, and I wondered when they would torture me again, and whether they would torture me in different ways. I wondered if I would ever be released, if I would ever see my family again. I wondered if anyone knew where I was. That's what I did.
Why were you finally released?
I don't know. They didn't tell me. They just came and they got me from the cell, and I thought they were taking me for another interrogation. But they took me to the front of the room of the police station and they told me they were letting me go.
Did they have you sign any documents before you were released?
No.
Do you have any record of this arrest and detention?
No, they didn't give me anything.
Did they say anything to you when they released you?
They warned that if I continued to participate in any activities for the opposition party, or did anything else to betray my country and go against the government, they would arrest me again. They said that the next time would not be so easy, and they would put me in prison for a very long time, and my family would have no idea where I was.
Did they say anything else to you?
Just that.
The personal statement that you submitted says that when you were being released, they told you you had to promise to remain loyal to the ruling party.
Yes.
But just now, when I asked you what they said to you, you did not mention that. Is there a reason that you didn't include that?
I mean, they told me many things. That was one of them. They also said they would imprison me if I betrayed the country or opposed the government. I just wanted to get out of there and go back home. I was in so much pain from all the torture, and I had not slept well or eaten clean food the entire time, and I just wanted to go home.
Okay. Did you seek medical attention after you were released?
No.
Why not?
I did not want to tell any doctor what happened to me, because it would be like I was telling on the government, like I was going against them. The government has a lot of informants across the society, including in the hospitals, to inform on people like me who are part of the opposition. I was afraid that the authorities would retaliate against me for seeking medical care.
Did you care for your injuries in any other way?
I had painkillers at home. I took those. I also had some ointment to soothe the pain in my body.
Did you continue to participate in political activities against the government?
Yes, but I was too afraid to attend meetings in person, so I communicated with the other party members through encrypted emails.
Did you have any other encounters with authorities after this time?
Yes, at the protest on March 15th.
Where did this protest take place?
In Freedom Square, the main square outside the government building in the capital city.
How many people were at this protest?
I would say there were about 5,000 people there that day.
Were they all in the square?
Yes, that's where the protest was. We met there at 11 a.m. and we're going to start marching to the presidential palace at noon.
Were there any protests in your country, any other protests in your country that day?
No, there was only just the one.
My research shows that there were at least 3 smaller protests outside of the capital city that day.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I thought you had asked if I'd gone to any other protests that day.
Okay. Did you know about the other protests planned for that same day?
Yes, our opposition party had smaller organized groups in the more rural areas of the country, and they had also organized protests for the same afternoon.
What did you do at the protest?
I passed out the pamphlets I had made, and I thanked the protesters for coming to show their support for human rights and democracy. I talked to protesters about why it was so important to oppose the government because of all the terrible things they did to our people just to stay rich and in power.
Did you do anything else?
That's everything I did in the square. Once the march started at noon, I helped to lead the protesters in chants. We chanted, "We want democracy, no more government torture. Where are the political prisoners?"
Did the protest ever become violent?
It was a peaceful protest, and the march was also peaceful. We were not there to commit any violence, and we never called for any violence.
Please listen to my question. Did the protest ever become violent?
Yes, by the authorities.
What happened?
We had been marching maybe about half an hour. It was supposed to take about 45 minutes to an hour for us to reach the presidential palace, since we were so many people and moving so slowly. But after half an hour, the riot police showed up in vans. They did not even give us a chance to turn back. They just started attacking the protesters. I saw people being hit with batons and kicked by the riot police. The riot police were wearing gas masks, so I knew there could be tear gas. It all happened so fast. The tear gas canisters were thrown into the crowd, and everyone was screaming and trying to run away from the gas. I saw a protester on the ground being kicked by 2 riot police. I yelled at them to leave her alone, and I tried to get to her to help. But there were too many protesters between us, and there was just too much panic and chaos.
Were you physically harmed during this protest?
Yes. I was trying to get away from the tear gas, and my eyes and throat were burning. I was coughing and felt like I was going to throw up. It was so hard to move anywhere because everyone around me was in the same state and trying to flee and panic. It was complete chaos. Suddenly I felt something hard hit me in my lower back and then behind my knee. I fell to the ground and the hits kept coming to my back. I tried to cover my head to protect myself.
Did you see who was hitting you?
Yes, it was one of the riot police.
And did that person say anything while they were hitting you?
He was yelling, "This is what happens to rats like you. You're so ungrateful. We give you everything you could ever need, and you keep demanding more. You don't deserve to live." And he kept hitting me while I was on the ground.
How did you manage to get out of the situation?
He eventually stopped beating me, and then I was helped to my feet by 2 other protesters. They said they didn't want me to get trampled in the chaos. They asked if I was okay. I was in so much pain and was still barely able to see them from the tear gas. They kept me up, holding me under my arms, and helped me get out of the crowd and into the grass on the other side. And I sat down. I waited there until I was in better shape. And then I spent the next 15 to 20 minutes trying to find my colleagues.
Did you find any of them?
I found 2, and we tried to find more together, but couldn't. The riot police had not left. They were arresting protesters. We decided it was best if we all went to our safe house and stayed inside for the rest of the day to try to avoid being arrested.
Did you go home?
I did not go to my home because I was afraid the police would come looking for me there. I went with my 2 colleagues to one of the safe houses the opposition party had for situations like this. I stayed there for the next month and a half. I heard that the police had gone to my house looking for me the day of the protest. They knew I was an organizer of the protest and that I'd been there, and they were going to take me away.
How do you know that?
That information was shared with me by one of my neighbors that I trust, who sent me an encrypted message over email. She told me it was not safe for me to come home.
When did you leave your country?
On May 2nd,
When did you apply for a U.S. visa?
I applied for it after I was released from detention. I think it was the 2nd week of February.
And when was your visa granted?
The beginning of March, I think the 1st week of March.
So you obtained your U.S. visa before you went to the protests on March 15th. Why did you not leave at that time? Why did you attend the protest?
It was very important to me that I attend the protest. We've been planning it for several months, and it was going to be the biggest demonstration against the government we ever had. I knew it was a risk. But the decision to leave my country and leave behind all my friends and family and everything I knew was a very big decision, and I was not quite ready to make it at that time. I needed to go to this protest first. I could not abandon my colleagues and all we had worked for. I just needed to do it for the future of my country.
Okay. And when you did leave, did you have any problems leaving?
I was afraid that I would have problems, so I hired a broker to help me get through security at the airport and bribe the officials to let me through without issues. I'm not proud of this, but I believed it was the only way I could escape with my life. I had not left the safe house that entire time, not until I left for the airport. I did not know when I would ever see my country again.
So you didn't experience any problems when you were leaving?
No, I got through.
If you returned to your home country now, what do you fear would happen to you?
Okay, does this question sound familiar?
Yes.
Big question? All right, let's remember, what are the 3 things we want to include in our answer to those big questions?
What?
What? Who? And why? Perfect. All right, let's give this a shot.
If I returned, I'm afraid that I wouldn't even make it out of the airport. The authorities would know who I was because they arrested me before for my political activities and were trying to arrest me again after the protest. I believe they would arrest me again and imprison me, interrogate me, torture me. I'm afraid I would be disappeared and no one would be able to find out where I was. I could even be killed. They do whatever they want to opponents of the government.
Do you think that there is another part of your country that you could live in safely?
Definitely not. The authorities share information about political opponents, and there are informants all across the country. I don't think there's anywhere I could stay where it was safe for me. Even if I managed to get out of the airport safely, where would I go? I would have to live in hiding like I did in the safe house, only this time I could never leave. What kind of life is that? And all because they want to punish me for trying to use peaceful means to bring democracy to my country.
Okay, I believe I understand your case. Did you understand all of the questions today?
Yes.
Is there anything that we did not discuss today that you would like to tell me?
No, I have told you all the most important details.
So at the end of the interview, the officer will usually ask you if there's anything else you would like to add. You don't have to add anything. You may just be so utterly exhausted and you're just ready to leave and be done with it. It's fine to say no thank you, okay? If there's something really, really important about your case that you did not have the opportunity to talk about, by all means, let the officer know. You know, I would like to talk about this one attack that we didn't discuss today. Sometimes the officer will say, all right, let's talk about that. But sometimes the officer will say, you know what, I didn't ask about that because, you know, I read your statement and I read all your supporting documents and I wanted to focus on some of the other events today. okay? But if there is something really important that you want to raise with the officer, go ahead and do that. For some people, the end of the interview and being asked if there's anything else that you want to say can actually be a very therapeutic moment for them. It is the one time of the interview where you're not responding to a question that the officer is asking, but you're actually speaking to the officer from one human being to another. And you're able to, in a short, don't go talking for 20 minutes, but in a short time, you do have an opportunity to remind the officer who you are as a person, what this means to you to be going through this process, what the idea of asylum represents to you, and just be able to emphasize that you are not just another case, right? That you are a person. Your story is your life. This is more than just the file they have sitting in front of them. For a lot of people, that can bring closure, and it can make you walk out of the room feeling really, really strong about your entire case being over on your terms. But again, you don't have to say anything if you don't want to, okay? Okay, please continue.
Okay. Now, I just have to ask you a series of questions that I ask every asylum seeker. These questions are not personal to you or to your case. They're all yes or no questions.
Okay.
Have you ever lived in or traveled to any country other than your home country or the United States?
No.
Have you requested asylum or refugee status in any country other than the United States?
No.
Have you ever held an official government position?
No.
Have you ever served in any military, police, or law enforcement agency?
No.
Have you ever been a member of a group that engages in terrorist activities?
No.
Have you ever been arrested or detained anywhere in the world for any reason?
No.
Are we all kind of doing that? Yes, the answer is yes. It's not a trick question. The entire story is about being arrested and detained. This list of questions at the end, as the asylum officer said, this is a script and they go through it at the end of every single interview. It's not about you, it's not about your case, what country you're from. They have to ask you these questions. One of those questions is, have you ever been arrested and detained? So if your story involves being arrested or detained and you've just told that story, there's no need to say no because you just want to get out of there and answer no to all these questions. The answer is yes, right? Sometimes the asylum officer will ask it a little bit differently and they'll say, other than what we've discussed today, have you ever been arrested or detained any other times? Right, then the answer could be no, assuming that those were the only times. If your answer to any of these other questions is yes, that doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem, okay? So the first question she asked, have you ever lived in or traveled to any other countries? If you were on vacation a couple places or you lived in another place for a brief time, that could be fine, okay? Any of these questions at the end that she's practicing now that you would answer yes to, that's a really good reason to try and have a legal consultation, because depending on why your answer is yes or what more facts are about that answer, that is something that you might want to speak with an attorney about before your interview. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem. For example, there's a lot of countries where you are required to undergo military service, and that does include weapons training, okay? So a lot of asylum seekers, the answer to have you ever served in the military is yes. A lot of asylum seekers, have you ever received weapons training, is yes. And they can still get asylum. But it's just something that if any of these answers as you're sort of going through your own lives in response to these questions is yes, it's a good reason to maybe try and set up a legal consultation. Okay? All right, let's keep going.
Have you ever been arrested or detained anywhere in the world for any reason?
Yes.
How many times have you been arrested or detained in total, anywhere in the world?
Just the one time I told you about today.
Okay. Have you ever committed a crime that you were not arrested for?
No.
Do you intend to commit any activities in the United States that are illegal?
No.
Okay. That concludes this asylum interview. Thank you for sharing your story with me today.
Thank you.
You will not get your decision today. The decision will take at least 2 weeks, and it may take longer. Please return to this office in 2 weeks to pick up the decision. If our office needs any more time to make a decision, we will notify you, and you do not need to come back in 2 weeks. We will then send the decision in the mail. Do you have any questions about this?
No.
Okay, we can leave now. Thank you again.
And thank you.
All right, thank you.